Hey guys, welcome to Cast and Spear. I'm your host John, and today we have back on the podcast Anthony Esposito from Black Flag Fishing on Instagram. Hey Anthony.
Hey John, thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. So yesterday we covered safety. Today we are going to cover local fish, tackle, and all things gear to help get you started. You might be new to kayak fishing and you're like, what do I need in my tackle box to give me a chance at bringing home my first catch? Anthony's going to go over some of the high levels that you should have. So Anthony, what kind of tackle should I be thinking about purchasing if I went to, my local tackle shop after I got my kayak and all set up?
Okay, so I'm gonna approach this in maybe in segments. I'm gonna start off by telling you about the stuff we all want to buy, which is rods and reels. Anybody who knows me, anybody who has maybe heard the previous episodes, might know that I am like a tackle junkie. So the first thing you're gonna look for when you're buying kayak specific gear is you want kind of a do-it-all rod. So when you're on a kayak, it's not like being on a boat where you have a bunch of rod holders and you can put them away when you're not using them and they're not in the way. When you're on a kayak, everything's in the way if it's on the deck. So you might have 3 or 4 rods you can take out with you. Generally, what I like to do is I like the 7 to 8 foot rod length. I think 7 to 7.6 is really key, but 8 foot is good for casting. So I would say get yourself a couple of 7-foot rods. They're going to be versatile. You can bottom fish with them. You can troll with them. They're not so long that they're going to be cumbersome to work with, but they're long enough that you can wrap that bow. Even if the rod's doubled over because you got a big fish on, you're going to be able to get around the bow. You're not going to be spinning around, trying to figure out where that fish is going. He's not getting the line tangled because you can keep him far enough off the side of the kayak to wrap around your rudder or your drive. So that's something to consider. Rod length is a big one. I know that out here on the West Coast, we fish a lot of longer rods, 9 and 10 foot rods for surface iron and stuff like that. Personally, I don't fish anything longer than 8'2" on a kayak. I know that's a weird length, but you can thank Phoenix Rods in their M1 for that. 8 foot would generally be the key for me, but 8'2" is fine. And it's only 2 inches. Anything longer than that, and if you have the jig hanging down by the reel like it should be for a cast, it's going to end up in the water when you tip that rod back over your shoulder and go to cast it. It's just a hassle. It tangles with your other rods. Some guys do it. I'm not saying it can't be done. There's guys out there who you can probably see them on YouTube, and they're magicians as far as I'm concerned, because for me, I put anything that long up there and I got that jig sticking into everything. I got the lines tangling up. It's just too long for me. 8 foot's about the limit. On top of that, it makes it really difficult to store if you're trying to get through the surf. If you need to lay your rods down and you've got 9 and 10 foot rods, it's hard to find a flat area on your kayak that's that long. 7 foot, 8 foot, you can lay them down. You can usually fit them inside the kayak if you have an open hole. 9 foot's just really long and cumbersome, and 10 foot's even worse. Now, as far as the actions go, that's going to be determined by your fishery and by, just the kind of angler that you are. Personally, me, I tend to lean towards a slower action rod. I like it a little bit softer. I feel like I get better leverage when I'm on the kayak. Some guys like a real stiff rod. Some guys who like the bottom fish and they're trying to detect a real subtle bite, 400 feet below the surface. They want something with a little bit of a little more rigid in the backbone, just so they can feel that tip. You know what I mean? Typically with a faster action rod, your tip's a little softer just because it shuts off sooner. Whereas with a slower action rod, you're going to have a little bit of a stiffer tip because it bends further down the blank. That's again, personal preference. As far as reels go, you just want something that's going to be durable. Spinning reels are typically more durable, I feel, in the salt. I don't fish a whole bunch of them, but that's more of a cultural thing. The reels that we fish out here on the West Coast are traditionally conventional reels. Bait casters, again, that's another one where depends if you like bait casters. Some guys like them, some guys don't. Personally, I love them. I think they're great. They're easy to cast. They're small and light. They don't take up much of space. They don't get hung up on your gear. You've got them in the rod holders behind you. They're small enough that they're not cumbersome. And then your hooks and stuff like that. You want to make sure that you've got all the standard stuff you'd have for fishing. Your hooks, your lures, You want to have some leader material with you, but again, you don't have a giant tackle bag with you. You typically have something that's the size of a small igloo cooler that fits between your legs, and you got to get all your gear in there. So pick the stuff you really like, take a couple jigs, enough hooks and weights to use a little bit of live bait, and don't get so hung up on live bait that if you don't have bait, you can't fish. Because fish eat jigs all the time. If they didn't eat jigs, all these lure companies wouldn't exist.
No, absolutely. Going back to your rods, do you only go with one piece, or do you have broken down ones?
Personally, I like one-piece rods. I don't like two-piece rods. I don't want to say it. I don't like them. I've had a couple in the past. I had a salmon steelhead rod that was like 8'6". That was a two-piece rod, and it was great because I could keep it in the back seat of my truck, and if I went to the beach, I could just pull it out and fish with it, and then put it away when I was done. It wasn't something I had to load up. But typically, I like one-piece rods. I feel like you might get a little better action. You don't have to worry about breaking one piece individual to the other because it gets tangled up. It's just more convenient for me, and I don't know, just personal preference, I guess. Some guys like a two-piece rod. I'm a one-piece rod guy.
Absolutely. And then going back to the reels, I know you said spinning reels are a little bit more durable. Do you like, I guess there's two ways to think about it, right? You can go cheaper gear and just know you're going to be replacing it after each season, or you can go a little bit better, maybe get like IPX6 or whatever you can get that keeps the water out. Knowing that kayak guys likely accidentally dunk their reels from time to time because it's just like you're 4 inches from the surface of the water, do you like have a preference, or do you look for something specific?
I will say that I should have been a little bit more clear before when I said that spinning reels are more durable. I don't know that they're more durable across the plane, but I think that they make spinning reels that are more durable than most conventional reels, and those are, as you mentioned, your IPX5, IPX6. For anybody who knows about the IP rating, it's essentially a rating against water. The X is typically for dust. You don't see that too often in fishing gear. And then the 5 and 6 is how it's rated. IPX6 reel is essentially waterproof. You're not going to get water in there. I suppose salt could creep in there over time, but I've got some reels that aren't even IPX anything. They're just decent reels, and I've dunked them. I've dropped them in the sand surf fishing. They've been banged around on the boat. They've spent summers in my garage just hanging in the rafters. Winters in the garage hanging in the rafters, you know what I mean? So temperature, they've had fresh water, salt water, sand on them, and they work fine. Again, those are spinning reels. I'm not a huge spinning reel guy, but I will give them their respect when it comes to durability. Having the entire mechanism separate from the spool, separate from anything that can move is I think it's great for being on the water. Now, again, like I said, that's not to say that you can't use conventional gear. I use conventional gear. Most guys out here use conventional gear. It just takes a little bit more upkeep. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's a good point though. It's like if you're getting into the game and maybe you're not familiar with conventional reels, don't feel like there's a cultural pressure that you need to, get a reel that you're going to be comfortable using and just get on the water and start catching fish. But
yeah, if you're just getting in,
oh no, good.
If you're just getting into the game and you just want to get out there and catch fish, don't even waste your money buying a conventional reel, because you're going to get out there and learn how to pick a backlash out.
That's such a good point. Absolutely. Okay, so now we got kind of the rods, the reels. What kind of tools do we need? Do we need like pliers, scissors, all that kind of stuff?
Okay, so pliers, absolutely you need them. Anytime you're fishing, you want pliers. You got hooks in a fish that's thrashing around. That is now just a live weapon that's throwing this pointy metal object around near you. Grab that thing with pliers and get it out of there as soon as you can. On a kayak, it's even worse. On a boat, you can step on it. On a kayak, you've got this thing thrashing around between your legs. If you're fishing with jigs and it's got, a 4 or 5/0 treble hook hanging out of its mouth, and it's slapping around in a pretty sensitive area, you want to make sure you can get that out of there as soon as you can. Lip grippers are great. You don't want to gaff everything that comes up. Having lip grippers on board it's a lifesaver. You can grab the fish, you can pull the hooks out, you can handle the fish essentially without having to touch it, which is great because, if you don't have gloves on, you get slime all over your hands, which I don't mind the slime sometimes, but if you get like a barracuda, those things are slime sticks. They get slime on everything. You'll touch them. It'll be on you all day. It'll be on your gear. It'll be on the kayak. Your paddle will get slippery. You'll get blisters. It's ridiculous how slimy they are and how much that slime can affect you. Just use the lip grippers, pull the hooks out, throw that thing back in the water, be on your way. A lot of guys like a game clip. I don't use one. I used one for a little while, and then I sat side saddle one day and I accidentally unclipped it and it drifted off into the oblivion with some fish on it. And that was the last time I ever used a game clip. I know some guys up north have had issues with sharks targeting the game clip because they've got fish hanging overboard in the water. That's another reason I don't use one. I know it's not super common down here, but I'm afraid of sharks. I don't care how comfortable some people are in the water. They terrify me. I'm not putting anything on the kayak that's going to invite them over. A knife is important to have. The one that I see people going without all the time are line cutters. Line cutters are so much more efficient for cutting line than your pliers or your knife is. Even if you have the pliers that have a blade or, a cutter down at the bottom section where it opens up, even if you have those, having something that's dedicated to cut braid that won't dull, it's more like a pair of scissors. You can get them cheap at like any sporting goods store. Go to Turner's, pick one up for like $6 or $7. They're going to save your day. When you're tying knots and you're trying to, say you get bit off and you want to get your bait back in the water as soon as possible, the last thing you want to do is be fiddling around with your pliers, trying to wrestle that little tag end off of there. And now it's all kinked and it's curly and you can't get it off and your knot looks weird because you can't tighten it. Just cut that thing off of there with the braid cutters, call it good and go. A net, it's actually mandatory you have a net on board. It's got to be 18 inches minimum. At the smallest opening of the net, it has to be 18 inches. If you don't have that on board, that is a violation of California sport fishing rules. A measuring board, you've got to have something on board to measure fish with. If it's, especially if you're fishing for, stuff like halibut or white sea bass, or if you're bass fishing and you plan on keeping them, you need to have that board on deck where it's accessible. Because if you're out there, you should be planning to catch fish. And if you're planning to catch fish, you should be planning to measure them if you're going to keep them. And know the regulations for your fish. You're not on a sport boat. There's not a captain to come over and tell you how big that fish needs to be. There's not a deckhand who's going to tell you that fish is too small and ask you if tell you to throw it back. You are in charge of knowing all that stuff when you're in a kayak. You're the captain, you're the deckhand, you're the angler. Everything that happens on that kayak is your responsibility. Even if you're out with a buddy and it's your first time, if Department of Fish and Wildlife stops you, guess who's going to get the ticket? It's you.
That's important.
And then,
sure.
Yeah,
those tickets are not
absolutely cheap. No, and it's a super easy thing to avoid. What I did, so I had a hog trough that I was using for a while. It got lost overboard. Again, you lose stuff when you're kayaking. It got lost, but what I did was I printed out, I put all the fish that were popular in our fishery. I put them in a spreadsheet in Excel and I put the legal limit next to it. So it was long and narrow, the list. I cut it out and I taped it onto the back. I basically laminated it on the back of my fish board so that if I didn't remember what the fish needed to be, I could just turn the measuring board over, find the length, and it was there. You have to do it every year because they do change. Limits change, stuff like that, but have something so that if you don't know, there's a lot of fish, a lot of them look the same. Just know what the fish are, know how big they need to be, know if they're in season. Don't go fishing I know some guys do like to fish out of season and they throw everything back. I don't get it. It's not for me. Just, if you're going to fish and you're going to put the fish through all that and everything else, just getting into ethical stuff. So I'm not going to mess with it too much, but just don't fish for fish that are out of season, in my opinion. Moving on to one other thing I want to address, a gaff. If you have a gaff on board, first of all, keep it safe. Have something over the tip. It's not a law. It's just common sense. Have something over the tip. So if you go overboard, you don't end up with that gaff in your leg. A lot of guys like to put it in the paddle holder. That's where I keep mine, or in the center hatch. But I like it in the paddle holder because right there, I don't have to open any hatches to get it out. I don't have to have an open hatch that could take on water if I go over trying to land a fish or something like that. Have it covered so that you don't stick it into your leg or your arm or something like that. And know that just because you see somebody on YouTube using a spear gaff, and I've done this before and I shouldn't have, I didn't know that it was illegal until luckily I found on my own. I didn't have the DFG telling me that it was illegal. Know that in California, you cannot use a spear gaff. You cannot have it on your kayak because it's considered a harpoon. And you can't use that if you are taking fish with hook and line. You have to have a traditional hook style gaff. So those are your main fishing tools outside of the rods and reels. There's a few other things you might need if you are fishing with live bait. Generally, I don't want to say generally, but typically you want to have a live well, something that's going to circulate water and allow those fish to move around and just stay alive for more than 5 minutes. Otherwise, you're essentially dead sticking bait. You don't have that great of action. You're just going to catch a bunch of rays. And I'm not talking about sun rays. I'm talking about stingrays. They're fun to catch once in a while, but after you catch what we call mud marlin more than once every couple trips, it just becomes a hassle. You got to unhook them. They're big. They fight like heck, and they're fun to catch, but they're a hassle to deal with on a kayak. Usually, you just lose your whole rig. Anyways, so a live well, something that circulates water, whether it's gravity fed or has a pump or a bubbler of some type. If you're going to be fishing live bait, and when I say live bait, I mean bait that's alive, not dead bait. You need something that circulates. A bait tube is an option. I towed one behind my Trident for a while, and it was okay. It added a bunch of drag, and there's a debate out there between the amount of drag you get from a bait tube versus the amount of weight you get from having a bucket full of water on the back of your kayak, which is essentially what a live well is. So, weigh your options and decide what's more important to you, whether it's the drag or the extra weight on board, but have something you can keep bait in if you're going to be a live bait, primarily a live bait fisherman. And then have a net that you can scoop those fish out with. Because when you're reaching in there and you're, doing the thing with your hand where you look like you're mixing up the water with your hand and creating a siphon, you're beating your bait up and killing it. You're rubbing scales off it. It doesn't even look presentable when you get it out there because you manhandled it and stuck it on a hook. Use a net. It's super easy to grab them out with, and then put a hook through them and just try to not molest that bait as best you can.
Oh, those are good points. I mean, bait presentation is everything. It's like if you've been on the sport boats, guys will just pick that perfect bait, and they're the ones who are getting hit. So it's like manhandling your baits on your kayak is no different.
Yeah, exactly. And you can't typically see in the live well because it's behind you in the tank well. So you're reaching behind you with one hand. The other hand, you're usually, trying to steer your kayak with the rudder, or you have a paddle in your hand, or you have a hook in your hand. It's just so much easier to use a net to catch those fish. It's less traumatic for the fish. It doesn't beat them up as much. And you're, like you said, you're going to get a better presentation as a result of those things. And so, to move on from the live well and kind of tie this in a little bit, that live well is going to need to be powered by something. That something is battery. Make sure that you have a battery that is sealed. Not for any other reason than it's super expensive to just buy a new battery every couple of trips because you let the one that you got at Bass Pro for $20 rot out. Get something that's sealed. It's going to be a little bit more expensive up front, but you're going to buy it once. Buy it once. Keep it clean. They're usually, they're sealed to the point that as long as you are not submerging them, and even if you did, they might be okay. I don't know, but I've never submerged mine. I know that I keep them in the hole of my kayak. I usually don't even bring them in. That's probably bad practice, leave them in the garage because they're susceptible to temperature. They still work. So, hey, sue me. As far as the other things that feed off that battery go, that's going to be a huge part of your fishing experience. Your live well, again, for bait, and then you're also going to have your fish finder is going to feed off that. If you have a backlit compass that is integrated into your hole, which I've seen, that's going to feed off a battery. If you have, I know some guys like to have onboard charging for their phone. They'll install a USB port that has like a flip up watertight door on it. That's going to be powered by your battery. This is all stuff that you can either tie it in, you can use different batteries. I like a different battery for my live well just because if I forget to turn it off, it will suck that battery dry faster than everything else will because running a actual electrical pump, a motor. But that's stuff that you need to have. You don't need to have, but it's stuff that does. I will say, what would I be? Let's see. It would amplify your fishing experience, I guess, or magnify your fishing experience and make it more fun for you. You can see what's going on. You can learn to use new tools. And a lot of us kayak fishermen, we're kind of gadgety, as a buddy of mine would put it. We're kind of gadgety guys. We like to have a bunch of, tools and electronics and gadgets and stuff like that. So just more stuff that makes the entire experience fun. But you gotta know how to use it. You got to keep it clean, and you got to make sure that you maintain that stuff.
So after you've spent all this gear, mortgaged your house, how do you keep the fish? How do you keep the fish good? Do you take ice with you? Do you just? I know you don't leave it hanging off anymore because of the sharks or the sea lions to eat it. Like, how do you keep the flesh of the meat of the fish good?
Yeah, no, you're right. You just spent, $2,000 on kayaks and equipment to go out there and buy fish that you could have got at the store for $15, and now it's not even good to eat anymore. You want to have. I like a cooler or a game bag. I have a long rectangular game bag that fits inside the hole. That's the one I use. A lot of guys like the one that's made by, I think, I can't remember who makes it. Reliable Fishing Products. Reliable Fishing Products makes probably the best known game bag in the business. They're not cheap, but they work great. I don't personally have one. I use a different brand, but those ones work great. They strap onto your bow, so they're really accessible. For me, I have the in-hole storage like I was talking about. So I keep the game bag inside. That makes it really easy to access. It's between my legs. These other guys, they have them up on the hole. They just unzip it. They throw their fish in. They zip it back up. They might fill it with maybe a 20-pound bag of ice at the beginning of the day. And you know what? They're super convenient because you can put your water bottle in there. You can put a sandwich in there. I know it's kind of nasty. You got your old nasty fish juice and your guts in there and stuff, but we're going to eat that thing anyways. Just throw your stuff in there. Keep it cool. And it keeps it out of the way. So, yeah, reliable keel bags. I think the one I have, I got on Amazon. It's not reliable. Like I said, I think it's made by a company called, I can't remember the name of it. It was like $50 on Amazon. Super affordable. I had it for 2 years, had a bunch of nasty old fish in it. Still works fine.
One thing I've been doing to prevent kind of the nastiness of like melted ice is just using ice packs. Just throwing a couple of those in, at least it keeps things cold, but it keeps things contained. I know it's not as efficient as like getting that ice slurry and having the fish kind of fully get engulfed, but sometimes it's better than nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. I used those for a little while. I still use them sometimes. The main reason I got away from it is my wife was not a fan of me refreezing old ice packs that came out of my fish bag and had like slime and scales on them. But no, totally feasible way to do it.
Perfect. Well, this was a great episode. I think we all have a better understanding of what gear we need to go out and buy. Thanks, Anthony, for coming on this week. All right, today. I mean, you're going to be back tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to be coming back to you guys with another episode. But if you want to check out Anthony, you can hit him up on Instagram. I have his link in the bio or in the show notes. And until next time, good luck out there, tight lines, and I'll see you on the water. Hey, one more thing before you go. If you're on the socials, the Instagrams, the TikToks, the other platforms, follow us. Say hi. At Cast and Spear all over the place. That's at CASTANDSPEAR. I'll see you over there. Chat soon.